Welcome, everyone, to the Every Brain Matters monthly speakers meeting. I'm Aubrey Adams, the director of Every Brain Matters. This is a nonprofit community developed by families negatively impacted by today's industrialized marijuana. We come together to seek healing by helping each other, finding connection, and drawing strength from one another. We want to provide pathways to navigate and survive and thrive this new era of industrialized marijuana. We understand families might feel alone in a world that is normalizing a drug that is causing addiction and mental and physical illnesses. And we understand that dealing with someone we love who is being harmed by the effects of marijuana can be very overwhelming. So that's why we developed family recovery resources and hold these type of support meetings to help prevent, manage, and recover from a loved one's cannabis use disorder or cannabis use. The link to our family recovery resources will be added to the chat in just a few minutes. So we come together to find that hope with our shared experiences. So we like to start our meetings, our speakers meetings, saying the serenity prayer. Let's have a moment of silence for each of us to use the way we wish to use. But I think it would be very appropriate for us to kind of use that time to pray for the people in Florida or anybody who is suffering tonight with the storm coming. And then we can all unmute and say the serenity prayer together. So let's go ahead and unmute. And here's our moment of silence. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you so much for joining me with that. And also, we hope Nina shares a little something extra special that's happening with her family so we can all send her prayers and positive support. And I'll let her share that when I turn this over to her. Just a few housekeeping guidelines. This meeting is about recovery and healing. If you're interested in any advocacy work, you can contact me outside of the time of this meeting. My email is Aubrey, it's AUBREE at everybrainmatters.org. We can't give medical advice here. And we also don't discuss religion in particular. But if somebody wants to share their religion, we allow that, their expression of their beliefs and their freedom to do that. So please know that we accept everyone here. If you are attending this meeting and have a loved one that is suffering from the harms of cannabis or marijuana, we also recommend that you attend Marathon meetings. And if you are the person who is using marijuana and having negative effects, we recommend you attend Marijuana Anonymous meetings. We also have what we call Every Brain Matters Climbers meetings, which is an open forum for families to come together, guided by a counselor, where we can talk openly about our shared experience and find the tools to help our loved ones and to become healthier and strengthen those relationships. Also, as you know, the meeting is being recorded, so we ask you to keep yourself muted at this time. We will open it up later after Nina talks to ask her questions or make comments at the end. Let's see here. So now I'd like to introduce Nina. Wait, I'm going to say it. She told me how to say it, and I should have practiced right before we light and everybody in. Nina, say your last name for me, please.
It's Nina Manolson.
Manolson. Yes, Nina Manolson. She has a son who had a severe episode of cannabis-induced psychosis, and some of you have met Kobe because he shared his experience a few months ago. And Nina was a very important part of her son's recovery from that CIP, or cannabis-induced psychosis. Her experience underscores the power of family as the grounding and healing force during unstable times. She is passionate about the need for society to speak more openly about mental health, psychosis, and the dangers of cannabis. She also professionally is a coach, a body peace coach who helps people in their battles with food and body image. She guides them to feel at home in their bodies as they are. And as a therapist, she focuses on helping women break free from the dieting cycles and adapt compassionate, empowering approaches to eating and living, which fosters lasting positive changes in their relationship with their bodies. That's a very powerful thing you do, Nina. Thank you for that. So we welcome you with open arms, Nina. Thank you for being here tonight and talking about this very important issue that so many of us are going through. And I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Aubrey, for inviting me here, and thank you for creating this. It's incredibly powerful and really an honor to be with you all. This is very hard stuff. Navigating our kids' instability, navigating our kids' addictions, navigating our kids' psychosis. It is brutal. It's truly, truly brutal. I want to say just a couple things about myself before I launch in. I live in Boston. Kobe lives with my husband and I. And my daughter lives in Israel. She is serving in the Israeli Defense Force and is currently on the border of Lebanon. And so, as Aubrey said, many of you have regular prayer lists. Please put Ruby on that list. It's not easy times. And even though Ruby is in a war zone, I have to say, one of the scariest things of my life was when Kobe was unstable. And I knew my kid was in there, but I couldn't find him. I didn't know where he was because he was so far in. There was no Kobe that I knew. So the way that I want to come at our story is really to fast forward a little bit to when we were getting treatment. We were at a first psychosis clinic called Rise in Cambridge, Massachusetts, right by Boston. And they use a curriculum called the Navigate curriculum in their work with people who are dealing with psychosis and in their work with parents. So we were in a parent support group, my husband and I. And one of the things that stuck with me forever was this stress vulnerability model they talked about. And they said, when there is a vulnerable brain and you add stress, a possible outcome is psychosis. And that is what you're dealing with. A vulnerable brain plus stress, and now you're seeing the results, psychosis. And that helped frame so much for me. It helped me, and I'll get into it more, about how to reduce the stress. But in the beginning, it helped me understand Kobe, that he had a vulnerable brain. Because I was like, what happened? Where do we go? Like, there was the weed piece, but like, why? And then I realized when I looked back, Kobe he has a vulnerable brain. He always has. He is the most sensitive human, big-hearted, like pure soul, like just like a gem of a human. And that makes one sensitive in the world. It makes one a little bit vulnerable. Plus, he has ADHD, which is a vulnerable brain. It's a neurodiversity. So you take a vulnerable brain and it's a little bit hard to navigate the world when you're ADHD and super sensitive and you want to be part of a gang. You want to be part of a community. You want to be with friends. And he was in a program that everybody was smoking weed. Great. They're doing great and they're all connected and everybody's smoking weed. Let's smoke weed. And then this was in a gap year after high school. And then he went to university in Canada, which is where I'm from. And it was, as several psychiatrists said to us, the perfect storm. Canada at that moment went legal with weed. Now, It's not the weed of yonder years. They were going legal with high potency weed. And so literally in Ottawa, where he was at school, there was like billows of smoke, people sitting, by the Parliament buildings getting high. And so it was all around. And he was in a new situation, trying to make friends. Great. I'll go with the friendly people, the people who are high, right? And he had dental surgery. So he was in pain. So there was a bunch of things. There was also, him dealing with his ADHD and in a new, setting. And he had some dietary special needs that weren't being met. And so he wasn't eating well. And all of it conspired to the point where we were talking to him on the phone. And I was like, no, something's not right. Something's not right. I could feel it. And I happened to be teaching in Costa Rica at the time. My husband was home in Boston. And I was like, every night I would get on the phone and I was like, something's off. And I was like, finally, Kobe, please go to the counseling center. Well, by the time he walked in to the counseling center on Friday, he was already unstable and they had no baseline. They didn't know who he was. They didn't know he was unstable. It just seemed like a kid who was sort of doing whatever. So then I kept talking to him over the weekend, and he then said, I'm afraid to go to sleep. I'm afraid if I go to sleep, I will die. And then I picked up the phone. So my brother-in-law is a psychiatrist. And I said, can you do a psych eval on the phone with Kobe? So he got on the phone with Kobe, with me, with my husband. Everybody's on the phone. And he asked Kobe a bunch of questions for a while and then said, Kobe, how would you feel about going to the hospital? And Kobe was like, okay. Like he was really suffering. He hadn't slept in like 4 days. He was not clear at all. He was hallucinating, and he was getting no help. And meanwhile, I'm trying to call the university. I'm trying to call resident assistant. I'm trying to get any help. So finally, we're like, great, he's going to go to the hospital. Could the university take him to the hospital? No. Could he go? No. So we finally got a friend who was in Ottawa who just took him to the hospital and said, I'm his aunt. Straight up lied. I'm his aunt. He needs to be here. They were right on it. They knew exactly what they were looking at and put him on Seroquel. And then my husband flew in. He was there and he was just in the hospital during the day he was overnight for a couple of days and he was still not stable. And by then I had flown in I'd gone to Costa Rica, come home, said hello to our daughter who was then 14, something like that, 15 maybe. And she was like, why do you have to go? Why can't he just go back to school? Like she couldn't understand it all. And then I went to Ottawa, and this was the pivotal moment. By then they had said, you can take him home we were staying at a friend's. You can take him home at night, but bring him during the day so we can see what's going on. And my husband and I switched basically in the air. He flew back home to be with our daughter, and I flew into Ottawa. And I walked into my friend's house, and Kobe came up to me, and he looked at me. And honestly, I think this moment changed the trajectory of our entire journey around healing. He looked at me and he said, are you my mother? And I said, I am. And I am here to help. I am 100% your mother. And he was like, okay. And he believed me. And that was the pivotal moment, because I've heard so many stories of kids that don't recognize their parents or don't believe their parents. And that in that moment, it was only until later did I realize that made it so that we were together. He knew I was helping. And then we navigated him in pretty much full psychosis pulling out of university, having to go to the office with me. He had no idea really what was going on, packing up stuff, and then flying back. And I remember we had in the land of travel agents eons ago, I said, you need to get us home. She said, I don't know what's going on in Ottawa, but I can't get you a flight to Boston. I said, I don't care how. I don't care, but get me home tonight. So we go to the airport. I've got a kid who's pretty much in full psychosis in the airport. And I am terrified about what's going to happen. And so we're waiting, and I need to go to the bathroom. And I'm like, and he's not speaking at all. He's completely nonverbal. This is a kid who literally started talking at 9 months and never stopped, except when he was in psychosis. And so he was really quiet. And I said, Kobe, I'm going to go to the bathroom and you're going to stay here. Do you understand? Nothing. And my fear was I would leave and he would do I don't know what. And then the police would come and we would be in a thing. So like I ran to the bathroom, I ran back, and then we had to go through customs and immigration. And I was like, okay, listen to me. You're going to follow me and you're just going to walk with me and not say anything. There was nobody home, right? How I said, there was nobody there. I knew my kid was in there, but it was like a locked vault. There was no Kobe. Later, he said to me, I said, do you remember being in the airport and me talking to you? He said, yeah, in my head, I was responding to you. In my head, I was having a conversation, but it wasn't coming out. And so then he stopped walking. We're walking towards immigration and he just stops. And I was like, honey, we got to keep going. And this is a kid who's bigger than me. It's not like a 5-year-old that I could just pick up. And I was like, we have to start walking. And we had these moments of like catatonia, like where he just would freeze. And so finally we get through immigration, we get through everything, and we get on the first plane. And I said, I'm going to walk ahead and you're going to walk behind me. And I stepped on the plane and the flight attendants are right there. I said, I am with my son. He is having a mental health crisis. I just want you to know he is safe to fly, but he's not himself. And they were like, we got you. I did that on both flights. And the flight attendants could not have been better because I was terrified. Because in the first flight, Kobe turned to me and said, so where are we now? And I said, we're on a plane and we're going home. And he was like, so could I take my clothes off here? And I was like, nope, not here. This is not and then, so the whole airport travel was like that. It was like he was walking into walls. And at one point they lost one bag and the connection. They were like, just walk down this hall, walk this way, go that way. And I said, I can't do that. I am with my son. He is having a mental health crisis. I am unable to go do what you're telling me. And then they were helpful. It was really remarkable. I was really worried about how the world could navigate with me, trying to get my kid home in a crisis. It's one thing. I got a sick kid, they have a fever, but it's another thing when it's a, 5'10" guy who's completely unstable. Everybody was really helpful. We got home. Kobe walked in the house and he just sat down and he was really sad. And I said, Cobes, what's up? And he said, I thought, and he couldn't finish any sentence really. I said, did you think it would all get better when you got home? And he said, yes. But he was very unstable. So we we stayed on the same medication for a little while. It seemed, and it was like having like a baby. I couldn't leave. Somebody had to be with him all the time. I had to sit with him. Please eat something. Please just eat this one bite. Please drink water. Like there was no ability to actually function in life. And then, there's another moment and that night, right before we were all going upstairs to go to sleep, I said, Kobe, can I get you anything? Can I do anything else for you? And he looked at me and he said, get me my brain back. So he knew he wasn't well. So we thought things were getting better, moving along on the same medication. And then something happened. He stopped sleeping again. And we think it was like another episode. And he became catatonic. And we literally had to guide him how to walk down the stairs. And we took him to therapy. And she said, I think you need to be in a hospital now. So we went to inpatient. It was the worst thing ever. The worst thing. They were like, let's take him off this medication. Let's put him on this medication. Then we'll give him this medication to deal with the side effects of that medication. It was like, I understand that hospitals are trying to be healing. This was not it. It was mostly traumatizing for all of us. And all it did is put him somewhere where he couldn't hurt himself, which has its advantages, but it was not a good thing. So finally, 10 days later or so, they released him on all this medication that we later found out was the wrong medication. And the first medication that he was put on, the Seroquel, when he was in Ottawa, was the best thing for him. The thing that made it possible for him to slowly get better was us just being there, literally being there every second. And friends would be like, how are you? And all I could say is, this is hard. This is hard. This is so hard. Just sort of waiting, hoping. And I'd be like, well, what else can we do? What else can we do? And they were like, it's time. You got to let the brain repair. It's time. There was a psychiatrist we talked to when we first got back, and she was looking back at some of his files to see, was there any signs like maybe this was coming? And she was like, no, like, I really think this is weed induced, and all the stress on a vulnerable brain created the psychosis. And she said, wow. And I've never forgotten. She said, wow, plot twist, right? Because I'm thinking the sky is falling in. Everything is terrible. Our lives are ruined. His life is ruined. And she was like, plot twist. And I was like, oh, okay. So if this is just part of our journey, how are we going to navigate this? So I had decided, a little bit crazy, but my mom has a home in Sanibel, which I hope is going to be there tomorrow. And she was there. And traditionally over the winter break, we would go down and visit her. And I was like, we're going to go. And everybody was like, you cannot travel with Kobe again. This can't happen. It's just crazy. No. And I was like, yep, he's going to go. He's going to see my mom. It's going to be safe. He's going to walk on the beach. He'll be in nature, because movement, even when he was in the hospital, we would get him on the treadmill and he would start walking and he would suddenly be able to talk and he would be able to connect. Like the movement really helped him getting moving. So I was like, we're going to get him to Florida. And so I had somebody who said, I'm going to tell him and help him pack. And they were like, nope, you're going to pack the suitcase. And an hour before, you're going to say, Cobes, get in the car. We're going to go see were your grandmother. They were like, less stress. Packing is too stressful. Knowing 2 days in advance that you're going to Florida, too stressful, right? Back to vulnerable brain plus stress equals psychosis. And so I really learned like no stress. It wasn't just less stress for him, that when he was unstable, it had to be zero stress. So I packed up a suitcase. I said, let's go. We did pretty well on that flight. And we got there, and my mom, being with my mom, it couldn't have been better. She at that time was with her sweetheart, Alvin, who's no longer alive. And I said to them, and they're big like news watchers and everything. I was like, no screens at all. No television, no news on the radio, no stimulus. And they were like, okay. And these are like, they're like late 80s, like these are set in their ways humans. And they were like, okay. And they would just sit with him. They were such a good example for me of just being, because I was hustling to try. What can I do? How can I make it better? Is there something I don't know? Right. And by then we still weren't even in a first psychosis. Oh, yes. No, there was one other amazing moment when I was in Ottawa and I'm on the phone trying to find help. And I was calling Mass General Hospital, and I was calling all these places wherever there was a first episode psychosis clinic. And they were like, well, we don't take your insurance. And well, does he qualify for this and this and this? And well, is he this and this criteria? And then I called the RISE program, this program that told me about the stress vulnerability model. And this social worker picked up the phone, and I said, my son is just in a psychotic episode and I need help. Literally the first thing I said to her. And she said, I can help you. And she did. For years, she helped us. And literally those were the like most powerful words somebody could have said to me. I can help you. Because I was like, I don't know what the heck to do here. I don't know anything about this. I am so lost, and my kid is lost. To have someone say, I got you, and we will get through this together. So we got back from Florida. We got a different psychiatrist after the hospital, and she looked at all the medication he had been put on in the hospital and was like, wow, I wouldn't have chosen this. Let's go back to what made him most stable in the very beginning. Took him off all of that stuff, which had given him night terrors and like shaking. It was a mess. Put him back on the Seroquel. And then he started to get better. Slowly. So slow. It was like it was hard to even see change, except after like a month, we'd be like, oh, there's a little more him there. Oh, and I remember, I don't even know how long it took, but literally we recognized when he smiled. It had been so long since we had seen him smile that when he smiled, we were like, oh my gosh, he just smiled. And then months later, he actually laughed. We were like, oh my gosh, he's laughing. I know this person. And the psychiatrist we worked with was elegant in her treatment. She was like, we're staying here at this high dose of Seroquel for a long time. And I was like, but I don't feel like this, it's sort of masking who my kid is. She's like, that's okay. We're locking down that brain so that it can heal. There's been a giant fire, and we just put a blanket on it to put the fire out, and we're going to hold it there for a while. And it took a lot of patience, and eventually, she said to Kobe, how would you feel about coming down a little bit? And they talked about it for several months until he felt stable. to come down a little bit and come down a little bit and come down a little bit. Right? So it was such a slow process. And in the meantime, we were also like doing as much movement, and we got him back at, he applied in this sort of weird moment of lucidity in between the first big episode and then that catatonia. There was like a week where he was like, what am I going to do now? I just left university. And a friend of mine said, just have him apply to UMass Boston. And I was like, a college application is not going to happen right now. And she was like, no, literally, it's like 2 paragraphs. And so he had gone online. And by the time he was coming out and was starting to feel like himself, he got the acceptance letter and he just did 1 class. And then he did 2 classes. And then it was COVID. And then it went online. And he did it at home. And honestly, it was great because it was less stimulus for him. And it was just enough to sort of give him this sense of like, I have a brain. He eventually transferred to Brandeis University. And when he was leaving UMass, he said, and going to Brandeis, he said, UMass, I didn't really learn a lot. And I said, oh, I beg to differ. I said, you learned that you have a brain that works. You learned that you can trust your brain again. And you learned that you can learn again and that you are getting better. And he was like, well, good point. Okay, fair. It was a good place for me. And then he went on to something that was more academically rigorous, which was appropriate for him. But the process of healing was like watching paint dry. It needed so much patience and so much lowering of expectations because of who I thought who I knew him to be and what I wanted healing to look like. And that it couldn't be my version of what healing looked like. It had to be his. And it had to be that he was incredibly in control of the medication and everything that went along with it. For Kobe, letting go of weed wasn't a huge breakup. There was a couple of hiccups, but it was like, nope, this doesn't work for me. This really messes with my brain. What we have since found out, because there have been a couple of times where there's been some instability, is that when there's too much stress, things feel wobbly for him and that he gets a bit manic. And so the last time it happened in the beginning of the war after October 7th last year. There was so much stress. There was so much anti-Semitism. And he was sort of caught in these worlds of people who were being really hateful that it caused so much internal stress that you've got this vulnerable brain, huge amount of stress, and he became unstable. And so he became manic. And we cranked up the medication. He got stable again. Again, I felt like, where's my kid? Because it was, again, we put the fire blanket, boom. The brain was on fire, put that fire blanket on, hold tight. And then he started to feel himself, and then he came back down the medication. And then it happened again recently when the hostages were murdered. Vulnerable brain, sensitive heart, incredible stress. And he got a little bit manic. And he, this time, said, I'm feeling a little unstable. He upped his medication. I didn't have to say a thing. He just said later, I was feeling a little unstable. I was like, do you think you might want to up your medication? He said, oh, I already did. He's on it, right? He knows he has a vulnerable brain. He knows that stress is harder on his brain than my brain, than most people's brains. And that it's going to take navigating and support to actually be able to do life. Kobe has so much to give the world, and even more so now that he's been through such hard times with his brain. And it's an ongoing special concern of his, is this incredibly brilliant brain that needs more, a little more cushioning, a little more support, a little more watchfulness. And honestly, I think we all have our special needs in certain ways. But when people's special needs are their brains, it shows up in really, really hard ways that can be so dangerous for them. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I want to say about the story. I think what I'd like to do is just hear what your questions are or anything that it brings up for you. I'm sure more will come out. I just really want to appreciate you for being here, because just the fact that you're here means that you are a huge support. Like, I couldn't have done it without my family behind me, my mom, my siblings. Kobe couldn't have done it without his family, and the people in your life can't do it without you.
Nina, that was incredible. Thank you so much. So many great points. And we are so grateful that you are here sharing all of this with us tonight. So much I took from it. Let's open it up to the families here tonight. And please just unmute, say anything you'd like, make a comment, ask Nina a question, or put it in the chat too if you'd prefer doing it that way. In the chat, Sarah says, I'm so glad Kobe's doing well. Did he have addiction to contend with?
So the weed, I would say in the beginning, was definitely an addiction, but it didn't become an ongoing battle. I think that there was a couple of wobbles where it was like, oh, maybe if I do this thing with these people, but it was such a quick feedback to him that it wasn't worth it. He just was like, I'm out. So addiction really isn't I think the high potency weed was the thing that pushed him into psychosis. But I think that his vulnerability in his brain is the big issue, and the addiction not as big an issue.
His consequence of the psychosis was strong enough for him.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Exactly. The consequence was so clear. It was just like, can't do that. That's not worth it. I don't want to feel that way. It feels like a nightmare. Kathleen said, how old is Kobe now, and what is he on medication wise? So he's 25 now. It happened when he was 19. He's on Seroquel still, and a much lower dose. And it's interesting because I have a cousin who's also a psychiatrist, and he was sort of my, call a friend all the time. I'd be like, okay, this is what's happening now. This is what's happening now. He's like, think about it this way, think about it that way, think about it this way, think about it that way. And when Kobe went on Seroquel, he said, as he started to come down, he said to me, my recommendation, I'm not Kobe's psychiatrist, but my recommendation, he said, and what I do with my patients is hold them at 100 milligrams. Even if you think that he could be totally off, you stay at 100. He said, because then, he said, two things happen. One, the person who's taking it knows that there's something else holding their brain, not just them. And it eases the stress of feeling like, I have to hold on, I got to keep it together. I have medicine inside of me that will help my brain be stable. He said, so that's the first thing. The other thing that it does is that if there's ever an issue, you crank that medication right up and it is going to be effective immediately. And that is what happened when this war started and Kobe became unstable. And I was like, and he was manic and he didn't realize he was manic. This was the first time. And I was like, I called his psychopharm person and I was like, Kobe's manic. And she was great. I was like, this is what's happening. This is what's happening. This is what she was like, yep, that's mania. And she said, and what does Kobe say? When you say, Kobe, this is mania. I said, Kobe says, I'm not manic. And she said, yeah, okay. So definitely. And she said, so does he think you're coming in hot on this? And I said, yes. He thinks I'm being like really on it. And she said, you're coming in just the right temperature. It's those little moments of support, right? That mean everything. It's like, yes, your intuition is right. Yes, you're right on the money. And so because Kobe was on a low dose of Seroquel, when the mania happened, whoop, right? The fire blanket went on. And so he has been on like an up and down dose of Seroquel because now he gets to navigate it. And so this cousin of mine, who's my phone a friend, he said, that's the way you want to be using a medication like this. You want to, hopefully the person who's dealing with the vulnerable brain is the one who's navigating and in control of, I got to up it. Okay, now I'm feeling good. I can bring it down a little. And the last time when he did it himself, I phoned my friend and he said, that's it, right there. That he should feel like he can be like, you know what? I need a little more support here. I'm going to increase this medication. No, I'm good. Everything's chill. I'm going to crank it back down.
We're at Mary.
Okay. Mary says, do you have any advice for those of us whose loved ones don't trust them, how to accept treatment? You know, as I said, that moment when Kobe said, are you my mother? And I was like, yes. And he believed me. I knew that was pivotal. Like I knew it was pivotal. And so I really think that when people don't trust us, we just sit by them. Like our actions are going to speak way louder than any words, than anything. You know, when someone says, oh, trust me, the first thing I'm like, I don't trust you. But if they sit by me, right, and show up for me and their actions speak, then I'm more likely to trust them. So I really think it's like just hanging in and being there. And I have no illusions that that's easy. Not one. It's hard. It's heartbreaking. It's really heartbreaking.
It really is. Thank you, Nina.
Yeah.
The next one's a comment. Thank you, Nina.
Yep.
Beautiful that you figured out how to help him. His break with addiction was easier than many. Glad he accepted treatment. Yes, that's what we want.
So both of those, super lucky, right? That the break with addiction wasn't hard and that he accepted treatment. I get, because I've talked to other parents when we were in the group of other parents, I know how lucky I am. I know how lucky Kobe is. I know how lucky we all are that he was willing. And part of it is, you know, I don't know. It could be that there was just a part of his brain that was still online, that was a little bit enough in reality to recognize me. It could be that even though he was in a really big psychosis, our connection was very, very tight all growing up. And so it felt familiar. I honestly don't know, but I know that, and I thank my lucky stars all the time that we had that. The navigate approach. So he was in a treatment center called RISE. It was a first psychosis episode clinic in Cambridge, Mass. And it's not a big center. It's like this one social worker who's created this program within the Cambridge Health Alliance, CHA, Cambridge Health Alliance. And she uses this navigate curriculum. And she would often pull out, pages of their curriculum for our parent groups. And I found it very helpful.
The next one says, thank you. Signs of mania after medication. She wants to know the signs that you saw even though he was medicated. Yes.
Yeah. So what happened first is he started eating less and he started sleeping less. And then it was huge amounts of creativity. Now, Kobe's pretty creative, but this was like, I need to show you 600 pictures that I took overnight. I am going to build an entire website in 2 days. I am like, it was ramped up. And also, he was very impatient and snarky with me. Kobe is like the sweetest soul on the planet. He is not a snarky human. He's just not. And so he was like, and I would say, like, Kobe, I think like you're like something's off. No, I'm not. And I was like, oh, yeah, definitely something. Because normally he'd be like, why? What's up? What's going on? Like he's just a curious human. There was no curiosity. It was just like, so that was the signs that I saw that he was manic.
Shandell says, such good information. Thank you. And then Kimberly says, could you please share what the signs and symptoms that helped you recognize his mania, which you just did. I am so glad he is well. I will pray for Ruby and your family.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. The other thing, the other sign, pressured speech. So Kobe's really verbal, but you can have a conversation. When he was manic, it was the monologue, the endless monologue. There was no breathing space. There was no space for anybody else to talk.
And what did you call that?
Didn't.
What kind of speech? I'm so sorry.
Pressured speech. Pressured speech. It just was like fast and furious and nonstop. Now, his mania didn't show up when he was first psychotic. It's shown up since.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's true or not, but I'm like floating this theory in my head that maybe there was an underlying mania that then the weed pushed that down. And then there was the dental pain. So he was having more weed because he was dealing with pain and the stress of school. And, I just wonder if that was part of the initial stress, because we didn't see it until later.
Okay. And Mary said, did Kobe ever complain of the side effects of medication? Any weight gain?
So with the Seroquel, there has been weight gain. My work is about feeling at home in your body. So I understand that it can feel a little uncomfortable for him, but I really believe bodies can be any size. You can be healthy and well at any size, in any size body. So Kobe's active, he's strong. And is he bigger than maybe he wants to be? Yeah. But honestly, and I've said this to him, would you rather have a brain that works or a body that's a little bigger? So it's a pretty good, to me, I'm like, I'll go for brain. And yeah.
Robin asked, during psychosis, did he ever use THC?
When he was, there was one like little patch where he was using, but we shut it down pretty fast. One other thing about the side effects of medication, when he was on the wrong medications, the one that the hospital put him on, he was having night terrors. He was itchy. He was, it was all bad. Every side effect. His movements were sort of stiff. It was the wrong medication and it had terrible side effects. The whole thing was just a mess of wrong because of bad treatment.
The next one is from Renee. She asks, how long did you crank the medication? And then can you share more about the Navigate curriculum?
Yeah. So it was interesting. So the first, so in the beginning, when he was first put on Seroquel, he was put on 400 milligrams. I don't think that was enough because it didn't hold him. So they figured because it wasn't holding him, it was the wrong medication. So then when we came back and got with better psychiatrist who was like, no, none of that. That would not have done any of that. Let's go again with the Seroquel. She put it up to 600 milligrams. And that held him. And we stayed there for, I don't know, like a year, a long time. And then slowly, then he was down to, I don't know, Kobe remembers everything, but it was somewhere around 200. And then the mania happened, and then he cranked it right up to 350. And then he stayed there for about a week. And then he was, again, you could, like, the more medication, the less of a kid I get. And so the less of him he feels. And he was like, this doesn't feel good. And he also sleeps a lot more. And now he's working. So he wants to be up. And so he was like, you know what? I'm ready to bring it back down. But then again, with the last stressor, he went back up a little bit, like probably like 100, 150 milligrams extra, and then backs it back down slowly. 25, like maybe 25 or 50 milligrams at a notch, but over like a couple of weeks. So it's like a right up right away, and then he goes down slow. I can't share more about the Navigate curriculum because as much as I remember that vulnerable brain plus stress equals psychosis, I don't remember a whole lot else about it, but it is findable on the internet. If you look for the Navigate curriculum for first episode psychosis.
Thank you. And then we got a couple more questions, and your husband's here. He would like to speak too. So we welcome Kyle here. The next one is, our stories are so similar to our sons. I have two questions, please. Were there any environmental factors that may have been noticed when the mania reappeared, such as seasonal changes? And any family history of mental health that you think may have made him more susceptible to the psychosis?
So, seasonal changes. You know, the mania each time has happened at different times. And it's interesting that you say that, because Kobe has a lot of allergies. And so his body is pretty sensitive to those changes. So it's an interesting thing for me to think about, which I hadn't really thought about. Is there more vulnerability when he's more allergic? It's a good question. It's a really good question. And history of mental health, we have some depression in the family. But there's not like a schizoaffective or anything like that. So it was kind of new experience for everybody. Yeah.
Well, if it's okay, we'd like to welcome your husband to unmute and share, and then we'll get to the last few questions after he joins us. Welcome, Kyle.
Sure. Thanks so much. I just wanted to chime in because I notice that the majority of names represented here on this call are women. And since women tend to take a more active role in caring for family members, I think that the male voice can sometimes be lost. And so I just wanted to speak up on behalf of all of the men who are also involved in part of this experience. I did want to add a couple of things. One is that just to speak to that question of seasonal changes, and yes, of course, allergies, but I think Kobe's also very sensitive to transitions. And we had just transitioned to go to Florida. And he had just finished a semester of school. So sometimes big transitions can be that big stressor. And I just wanted to spare Nina to answer this other question that comes right after, which is that yes, he is good at talking with therapists and really uh, listening to what they have, taking suggestions, and trying to implement strategies in his life. So that's pretty much what I had to say. I did want to underscore something that Nina said, which is very powerful, which is that what if your child doesn't respond? Sometimes simply being there and being present. When he was in a stage of total monologue, where he really wasn't able to be in dialogue with people, we just were there. And Nina said, we talked about this earlier, we're not trying to tell other people's stories, but he had just turned 19 or something, and him being in the adult ward was very hard because everyone was much older and had been having these problems for much longer. And so it was intensely painful for him. Nina said it was like the worst thing in the world. I didn't think it was the worst thing in the world, but I think it certainly occurred that way to her and to him, just because, I don't know, I always think things could have been worse. But just being there was really, really important, and I think was probably the single most important factor in him getting well, was remaining in relationship, in contact, in physical proximity to him throughout the experience.
Yeah. And I want to say, since Kyle's talking, is that this was a team effort. I know he says, moms, tend to lead, but Kyle and I made a really good team. And because we were both working, and it required so much being on. And when Kobe was in the hospital, we would just tag team. And thankfully, as I know, Kyle was like a little more like, okay, this is how hospitals go. And I was like, this is so not okay. There's nothing okay about this. This is completely traumatizing. But where they were good is they let me stay there most of the time. I had to leave at night, but their visiting hours were like 2 hours. And I was there, like anytime I wasn't working, I was there. And they just opened the door and let me in and let me stay there and hang out with him. Wow. And we would listen to books on tape, and I would play music, and I would bring in my essential oils, and I would just be there, be like, let's go walk around. Let's go get on the treadmill.
One thing that I would also add is that sometimes, because all of these institutions have a broad range of employees, sometimes you get employees who actually want to get in the way of your own care for your family member. And it's really, really important to establish your boundaries, take up your space, and advocate for their well-being, because sometimes the people on staff will not do that for a patient. And so if you're not looking out for them, they might not be getting looked after. And that also can make things worse. So you really have to insert yourself into the team, the relationships, and fight for what's best for your patient there.
So very well said. Thank you, Kyle, for adding that. That is so true. Advocate for your families. And when the hospital knows the family's present, you get better care too. Absolutely.
That's literally why I was like, at least, if I'm there, like I'm there protecting, literally. I could go on and on about how I feel about that hospital.
Thank you, Kyle, for chiming in. We are so glad you're here, sharing your perspective. So very important. The male perspective. So thank you very much. And please keep letting us know when you want to talk. There's a couple more questions here. Do you see them, Nina?
Yeah, I do. So I put in a link. When Kyle was talking, I just looked up the Navigate curriculum, and that's the link that came up. Is DBT or CBT therapy part of the navigation curriculum? I don't know if it's part of their curriculum. And I don't feel equipped because I just don't feel equipped to answer that question, whether DBT or CBT therapy is super helpful for psychosis. What I can tell you is our experience, which is for Kobe, it was a lot of really normalizing. It's okay. You're okay. Like, you're okay. It's going to be okay. You've had a really intense experience, but you know what? We're going to get through this. We can do this. We can navigate this. Like, it's not for nothing that that program is called Navigate. It's literally, we can navigate this. We'll get through this. This is hard, but we do hard things. We can make it through this. And for him, Kobe says CBT was definitely part of RISE. Well, see, he's qualified to tell you. And RISE is not a program only for teenagers. Kobe, is that true? They had a teenage group, but then they also had adults, because I remember there was like a whole thing. Yeah, that's true. There's a sense of, I feel like a really important part of therapy was also like, you're going to make this, you can do this. Like, just keep showing up for yourself.
There's so many things that you have shared that I love, and I could probably talk another hour about it. But one, you normalized other activities and strengthened those relationships, those activities of normalizing the day. Let's go take a walk. Let's, just do normal things, get out of the room, and just be normal, participate in normal activities like that. Two, you kept telling Kobe he's capable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes we're so scared and fearful, and which is so justified in this situation, that sometimes our messaging is like, well, this is so out of control. We don't know if you're capable. And maybe at moments they're not capable because the psychosis is there, but you still navigated the psychosis. Like, okay, this is what's going to happen, one step at a time, one moment at a time. And the patience you had. Also, I appreciate you using the term a brain on fire. Because it is a brain on fire. We've got to calm it down. Yes.
Aubrey, there's one thing that you said about normal life. So Kobe's always been able to cook. He's my partner in the kitchen. And even when he was incredibly unstable, like seeing things, hearing things, like really not in reality, I'd be like, Cobes, can you make some eggs? And he'd be like, yep. And it would take forever, but he could slowly sequence his way through something that was so familiar to him. Right. And I was going to stay in the kitchen, make sure that the fire wasn't on or anything like this, but when he was getting better, when he was still at a very high level of Seroquel, but he was, and not totally himself and really vulnerable, we took cooking classes together. I was like, you want to go cook? And he was like, okay. And we would cook, and literally we still make things from that era where we took cooking classes, because they were recipes that we loved and we enjoyed it together. And it was just like, cooking is so, not everybody likes to be in the kitchen, but we do. And it's so many things. It connected us. It's physical. It's sensual. We end up with a product. He would eat. Like, there was a lot of good things in that. So sort of whatever your kid's thing is, like, do that thing. And that happened to be our thing together, which was really, really special.
So I have a background. I worked in physical therapy for 20 years before I had this nonprofit. And so what you're talking about is ADLs, activities of daily living, and getting back to just that normal thing, like a
Yes.
simple thing of just the cooking the eggs instead of Kobe, make us a 5-course meal, starting so like that. Even when we're rehabbing an athlete, we get them back to their normal movement
Yeah.
patterns as soon as possible while they're healing, because that strengthens the brain, it strengthens that pattern. So
Yeah.
good points, Nina.
Yeah.
That's so good you're sharing that.
Was his, what did you say his vulnerable brain was? What did you say he had? ADHD?
ADHD, and he's just a sensitive human.
And then it was pain. So then he started using. Is that?
So it was social engagement. And then also he had a dental surgery, and there was a new situation, transition into school, and not knowing people and not having the supports. So there was a lot of things that made weed and the community of weed really appealing, and then just do more weed and more weed and more weed. And then I can just like skate through. And then it was, spontaneous combustion.
Actually, I wanted to mention a little detail on that, and Kobe may want to chime in, and I'm not sure how long you can even be on this call, but I did want to mention that he was in fact smoking morning, noon, and night, and the switch that happened that I think was what sent him over the edge was that he stopped cold turkey. He and I had a phone conversation in which it had become clear that things were getting out of control. And he's like, okay, right, I'm going to stop. So he stopped cold turkey, and then he took his ADHD meds. And then that created a psychic whiplash. And the result of that was that he had nothing to calm himself down. And that's when he really went into the sleepless phase. And the sleeplessness is what took him right over the edge. Because I saw him first when I went up first, because Nina was out of the country. And I think that was the big switch. And when they were playing around to try to get him back to any kind of normalcy, Nina didn't mention this, but they used Haldol, and Haldol was what snapped him out. But it ended up being a problem because they had to give him other medications to help counter the effect of the Haldol. And they had bad side effects, like everything was bad. And someone mentioned something about the support team, psychiatrist, therapist. I mean, the psychiatrist and the therapist can both make everything better and also make everything worse. So you get the wrong person, it could be way, way pushing things in a not good area. So those are the extra things I wanted to jump in. And Kobe has volunteered to hop on and say hello to everybody, especially for people who may not have seen him a few months ago.
Yeah, hi, it's me. I'm Kobe. I just think this is particularly kind of cool to have my whole family here on the. I was like, might as well say something. Everyone's saying something.
Since we're talking about you.
Yeah, right. But it's interesting. I mean, there are certain parts of it that I kind of block out that are tougher to hear about, but it's also like very cathartic and very healing to be like, oh wow, look, there are all these people who care about you and care about your story, and so I really appreciate everyone being here and listening. And I want to say a big thank you to my parents for being the most incredible supports. And it really makes that difference to have someone in your corner who's there through all of it. Even if the person, your child or your relative doesn't recognize it all the time, knowing that you're there, like I want to believe that they know on some level. And yes, it was it was not only did I quit, and so I was extremely anxious, all of the anxiety that I had kept out with the weed came back in and overwhelmed my brain. Everything that a college student is worrying about, school, I was behind. I was worrying about my sexuality at the time. There were all sorts of things that were just overwhelming me, that weren't even rational all the time, just things. And that all came back. But the big thing about weed is it was regulatory for me, and it regulated my sleep and it regulated my eating. And so I would smoke to go to bed at night to make sure that I could get sleep. So I stopped smoking, I stop sleeping, and then I stop eating. And if you're not eating and you're not sleeping, like any person is probably going to fall into something. So that was kind of how the psychosis started. I did end up hearing voices. And most of the time, it was a weird sort of thing where I was able to say, um, I know that that's a psychosis voice, that that's a hallucination, but still, like, especially as they got louder and I was hearing more, and I was like, this is not my thoughts, this is not my brain talking. Like, it felt like a bunch of people whispering around my brain all the time. It's really scary and it's really overwhelming, and it's not easy to just like be like to just block it out. And I saw a question about like, I really want to help, my family member with something that they can smoke, but I don't want them to smoke weed. Um, I think that's a really tough one, but there are certain like pieces of jewelry now that you can like breathe through, and things that have like flavored air, vaping alternatives, and something that like gives that oral fixation can be good. Um,
Kobe did a lot of chewing on things.
yeah,
A
that's kind
lot
of
of
where I'm
chewing
going.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's it. Yeah.
Okay. And then Kobe, I was going to say, since you brought up the whole thing of like, hearing things, Kobe and I pretty early on, I think when we were still in Ottawa, we created this game of real or not real. And so, because he knew like he knew like there was something, but it seemed very real. And so he'd be like, okay, real is the fact, like, I don't know, like on the plane, like, is it real that like someone's telling me I should take off all my clothes? I'm like, nope, not real. He's like, you sure? I'm totally sure. 100% sure, not real. Okay. And it was interesting because we told this social worker who was helpful Esther Kletter. She was helpful to us the whole time. And we told her about our real and not real because it happened. We did it for a long time. Like, is it real that this is happening? Is it real that someone's saying this? And I'd be like, nope, not real. Or he'd be like, is it real that Ruby is, I hear Ruby at the door. And I was like, yep, totally real. That is her. So, but I told Esther that we did this, and she was like, that's actually not how we work with psychosis at all. We let them have their experience. And if that's their experience, it's real to them. And I was like, okay, but that's not what works for us. So it was interesting to me because we were like, this really works for us. It's like reality check. Is this really happening? Is this not really happening? Until Kobe could really trust his own brain. But she was like, no, that's not really how it's usually done. So it's really what works for you. What is helpful for you and your family?
Thank you for saying that, Nina. Everybody here needs to hear that because we're all going to compare each other to everybody's story, and why didn't this work for my family, or why did it work for your family but not for my family? And it really is different for everybody. So that's why we come together and share, so we can take the nuggets and apply what we think might work for our family and find that hope and that strength to get through this. Jill, do you have your hand up?
I do. I just have one question for you. Was when he was in his psychosis and you were talking with a psychiatrist, and it's cannabis-induced psychosis, was schizophrenia ever brought up?
Yes. There was a lot of differential diagnosis. schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder? Was this manic depression with psychotic features? Was it genuinely just first episode, one and only weed-induced psychosis? We went through all of the, and for a while they were not willing to say this was weed-induced first episode psychosis. They were like, this must be because when he came back, he got better and then he got catatonic. They were like, initially they were like, well, that's just weed. But then they were like, nope, we're now into this whole other world. But then it never really materialized into that. And so I think even recently they were like, we have you down as having this thing. And Kobe was like, I don't have that thing. So they were sort of all over the place with diagnosis. And absolutely, they were totally doing the classic, okay, is it this? Is it this? Is it this? Do you have this? Do you have this? What about this? What about the history? They were looking at everything.
Okay, so when you got to the bottom line, you just realized that it was this cannabis-induced psychosis, and your son took hold of that and realized.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's my husband and I believe that too. We're in the stages of we're being told it's schizophrenia, but we don't believe that.
Right.
And Jack, my son doesn't believe it either.
Well, and that's the thing too. I really there'd be things that they'd be saying, and I'd be like, no.
Yeah.
Like, no, I know my kid. I grew up with him. Like, he grew up with me. Like, you've known him for 5 minutes. How are you even coming up with this? Okay. Like, that's how I felt a lot in the hospital. All these meetings, and they'd be like telling me stuff. And I was like, you don't know him.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Advocacy part. And no matter what the diagnosis, no matter what the diagnosis is, the THC is going to make it worse. So, that's the battle for so many of the families, because the loved one usually has an addiction to it and is believed it's not the THC causing the psychosis. But yeah, it's so rough. Good question, Jill. Thank you.
Well, and Jill, now we're looking at what does it mean that he's had these manic experiences? And so then, does that mean he's manic depressive? So, but we've never seen the depressive. So what, but that's the thing. Everybody, everybody wants to put a label. I'm like, this is somebody who has a vulnerable brain, and in stress, it's going to look like something. That's our reality. That's our diagnosis. You can put whatever DSM-5 label you want on my kid. But what I know is that stress is going to impact him poorly. Mm-hmm. That's what I know.
Wish you the best, Jill.
Thank you.
Yeah, having the good fortune to speak with Kobe earlier today and listening to the whole family speak, it seems so obvious to me that you built a very powerful foundation of love and trust as a family early on, so that both your strength and your resilience was able to take hold and build on that as you met this challenge. And that's testament to a lot of parenting, not just the beginning of parenting when the problem arose, but the continuation of the relationship you built. And it's good to see that.
Thank you. Yeah, we feel pretty lucky. We feel very, very lucky. And, we've worked on it. We all work on our relationship, and it's not easy. But, such is relationship and such is life. One thing I wanted to say about, Mary said, I'm curious about the hospital in Ottawa. You said they were on it. Did they have knowledge of cannabis-induced psychosis? So there was a funny moment when there was this doctor, Dr. Moise, came down the hall, and Kobe said, that's Monty, my brother-in-law, who's a psychiatrist. Now, it wasn't my brother-in-law, but he did, and that was not true, but he did look exactly like my brother-in-law. So it was like, true, not true, kinda. Does look just like your uncle, but not him, but also a psychiatrist. It was a very funny sort of moment of like reality, not reality, where are we? But he was the one who said, sat me down. He was the first person, like I didn't know anything about psychosis. And he said, I said, what the heck is psychosis exactly? And so he started to explain to me what psychosis was, what was going on. And he started, and he said, and I am seeing it all the time now with this high potency weed. And then he took me over to his office and showed me the poster on the door of his office. And it said, keep off the grass. And he said, yeah.
And this was 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And they already knew about it. Okay.
They knew. Absolutely, they knew about
Nina,
the high potency weed and psychosis. Hi.
I joined. Kyle just texted me, and I'm joining a little late, but I would love to sort of interject since I'm currently, and I don't mind sharing with people, in rehab for 50 years of marijuana addiction and something called Cannabis-Hyperemesis syndrome, which was horrible. And I was borderline crazy. I mean, I don't mean to use that word, but I was losing it. So I just want to comment on what you just said, that I'm here in rehab. They didn't know what CHS was.
Yeah. Let me just chime in if you don't mind for a second. CHS is cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. People can have it in combination with the cannabis-induced psychosis. They can have it in combination with the cannabis use disorder or the addiction. So I don't want to ask your name to not break your confidentiality, but when somebody has CHS or cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, cannabinoids are the chemical, the drug in the plant, the cannabis plant. Hyper means excessive, emesis means vomiting. And it's a syndrome because they diagnose it as a syndrome because there's not an exact test for it. So when you drink too much alcohol, you can usually get sick and you vomit it out. Your body rejects it. You're at toxic levels. And alcohol's a water-soluble drug, so you usually can recover from it within a few hours or a day. But you can die from alcohol poisoning. Well, with cannabis, when you're at those toxic levels and you have too much in your system, it's a fat soluble drug. So it adheres, the CBD or the THC or whatever the cannabinoids, whatever the chemicals in the cannabis plant, adheres to our fats in our body, and our fattiest tissue is our brain. That's why we see severe mental effects of cannabis. And then it gums up the endocannabinoid system. So your body's trying to reject this drug, but it's not able to get it out because it's adhering to the fats in our body. So people like you who've experienced that get very, very sick and can be very high risk for dehydration and go into organ failure if you don't get treatment.
So mine was different because it was, mine was different that I never threw up, but I would retch uncontrollably anywhere from 30 minutes to the whole day.
Yeah.
And I attributed it to a generalized anxiety disorder with panic attacks. And they could go on and on and on. And finally, my psychiatrist, after putting me on different drugs that made it worse, said, you need to check into rehab. And I was like, for weed? And I said, yes, because I couldn't stop, because the only thing that stopped it was smoking more weed. And I was borderline, like, my family, just everything kind of, it manifests differently, I think. But I will say that, so I came into rehab and I was showing my counselors, and they said, we never heard of this. And I'm showing it to them on WebMD, and I just can't believe it that they were so ignorant on the subject. And it said that you have to stop, and it can take weeks to work out of your system, which, but I will say that the good news is I've been clean for 2 weeks now, and I do feel something very different inside of me. Like this object that was inside of me has lifted. And I haven't had this in the pot community. We call it scromiting. It's not an unknown thing. So yeah, this is really interesting. I'm sorry I came in late, Nina. I'll watch it later. But
No, it's totally fine. Good to
I
see
don't
your
mind
face
sharing
and
with
see you
people
doing
because
well.
I always thought pot was so innocuous and, good medicine. And yeah.
We appreciate you sharing, and we're so glad you're getting better. And in low doses, like, we need to be clear, so we talk about the truth. THC can minimize nausea, and they do use it medically with chemo patients or wasting syndromes like AIDS. So there is a FDA-approved medication called Marinol. Unfortunately, the products that are available statewide or in Canada are very high potency, like Nina was sharing earlier. So it has the exact opposite effect, and we get at toxic levels, because even the Marinol has limits to how much you should use a day, and the doctors know that, so they don't over medicate their patients. So yeah, I mean, that's why a medical professional and the FDA needs to approve medications. And it's one of the dangerous things about this industry, that they don't need to be calling these products medicine when they have such severe side effects.
The saying I say is the medicine becomes the illness, and that's true of so many things that we use as medicines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Okay.
Raylene, I want to answer your question. I think, given the terrible experience that I had at the hospital, the questions that I would ask before, you said any questions we should be asking as we are looking for treatment programs for our loved ones. We are dealing with psychosis drug-induced, is how much family input? How much family input in there? Like, how much can I be there? Can I be in the meetings? Will you be listening to me? Right? Like, nobody can navigate. Somebody with the most stable brain cannot navigate the hospital system by themselves. Then you put somebody who does not have a stable brain, whose brain is on fire, and you put them in that system without supports? No, not happening. So that would be my number one question, is how involved can I be? And what are the ways that you approach psychosis? And what are your ways for helping, with addiction? And are you ruling out other things at the same time? If you already know it's, drug-induced psychosis, that's one thing. But if suddenly somebody is psychotic and they were weed users, is it schizoaffective? Is it, bipolar with, psychotic features? Like, you want to know, what is their treatment? How do they go about it? What is their protocol? And how old are the other people in there? And what other issues are they dealing with? Because sometimes I just felt like Kobe wasn't that safe in that hospital.
Great points. I was wondering, I think we've gotten through all the questions. I don't see anybody else's hands up. I was wondering if it would be okay, since we've got Nina, Kyle, and Kobe on, if we could go do one final thought from each of you, because having the whole not the whole family, but having the family here is empowering, beautiful. And I think we're all like, oh, we want to be part of your family. Like, I'm sitting there like, oh, what a lovely family you are. We're so blessed to know you and to be part of this tonight. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. And then if we go around and do that last final thought, I think I'll start with Kyle, then Kobe, and then Nina. And Kobe, if I can nudge you to put a plug in for the meeting you're doing with Doug right before this meeting on the second Wednesday of every month, please do, because another thing I really learned from Nina tonight is she reached out for her positive peer support, and she got it. And she navigated through where it wasn't and where it was for her. Kobe is a positive peer support for people that have experienced cannabis-induced psychosis and how to survive that and get through that. So he is volunteering his time 1 day a month for a meeting where people can come who are going through the same thing and hear from Kobe, and a professional counselor too. So if you don't mind, let's go ahead and do that. So Kyle, I'm going to put you on the spot. What final thought, as a dad's perspective that has a son that went through cannabis-induced psychosis, what else do you want us to know?
Yes, Nina mentioned that Kobe is a good cook, and he's an amazing cook now. But I will say this about his process when he was coming out of psychosis, was that he was just sort of he had learned how to do grilling, but he was re-exploring that. And he was terrified that he would leave the heat on and not turn off the gas and not do this. So he was actually coming from a place of deep insecurity and lack of confidence around his own area of mastery. So it took him literally years to get to a place where he was like, yep, I turned it off. Yes, I did this. Yes, I did that. So he could put those insecurities behind him and focus on the art, which is his cooking talent now. So that's just my point, is that people who are going through this, if they are going to be able to come out of it, you have to give them a very, very gradual, step-by-step ability to refamiliarize themselves with their own sense of mastery and control and trust in themselves.
Very good point. Thank you for sharing that, Kyle, and thank you for being here with us tonight. Kobe, we'll go to you next.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that you could see me quickly, so this is what I look like. If you weren't. It's funny, Dad, that you mentioned the cooking, because I thought you were going to tell a different story, which is that while I was psychotic, the only thing that I could cook is an egg. It was one of the first things that I ever learned how to cook, and I think Mom and we were staying with our family friend, they're like, see if you can cook an egg. And I remember being deathly afraid, actually, that a chicken was going to come out of the egg. That was part of I was like, what if this is the one egg that, is not an egg and still has a little chick in it? But I cooked the egg, and something about cooking, the fact that it was like very simple. You just put the egg in the pan and wait for it to cook, and then you take it out. Like really relaxed my brain. So finding those things, like cooking, like exercise, even if it's taking a walk, going on the treadmill, something like slow that kind of takes the brain off the constant, overwhelm and thoughts and stuff like that. And so that's one thing. And then the last thing, like what I really want my story to be an example of, is recovery being possible, but it also being a journey and taking time, but that like things get better. And I am amazed that I'm like here and where I'm at, and that I'm feeling so good. And I just want that for everyone and for other people. And so if you do want to contact me and you are looking for support, or if I can talk to someone for you, like I just want to do as much as I can. I can put my email or something. But yeah, I'm here.
Thank you, Kobe. Please do put your email in the chat. And please do, everybody, if you want to meet Kobe more, come to that meeting and with Doug, and we're building that up. It's from 8.
I totally forgot to plug it.
Go ahead, plug it in, Kobe. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's 8 your time?
No. It's from ages 18 to 35
Oh,
is what I was
18
about
to
to say.
35.
It's at It's at 5 p.m. Central Time.
Right.
So what time is that for you? You're all the
So
way on
that's
the
6 p.m. Eastern. Yeah. And we're talking about like all of the subjects that are around this. We did a meeting on shame around like psychosis, and then we did a meeting today on the journey from like starting weed to realizing that it's not so good for you. But it's really just a supportive, safe community. I really recommend it.
Thank you, Kobe. We're so glad you're here with us, sharing your story, and thank you for giving support to others too. We really appreciate that. Nina.
You know, the final thing I want to say is the fact that you're all here speaks volumes. And the fact that you're here means that you're exactly who your loved one needs. Somebody who cares, somebody who's going to show up, somebody who's going to get support, somebody who's going to do the homework, do the research, figure out the place, hold their hand, help them cook an egg. Like, you are that person because you are here in this meeting. And I just want to give you all the appreciation in the world, because this is brutally hard to see somebody that you love so much suffer and would do anything to end their suffering for them. And yet you can't control it. It's so hard, and you are brave. You are amazing. And it takes huge patience.
And one of the key phrases to remember is, we can do hard things.
That's when we started saying that in our family. It was well before what's her name was saying it. We were like, I would look at Kyle and be like, this is so hard. And he would say, we can do hard things.
And you did.
And
you
we
guys
did.
are shining examples of that. And I love the way you say too, you know, there are people that are attending the meeting tonight that their kids are homeless and lost in psychosis. And it's really hard on them, and they're leaning on their families, and they're leaning on their program and their tools. And it's a space that we never thought we would ever be in, but here we are leaning on each other. And I personally have draw a lot of strength from the three of you being here tonight. Our love and our prayers for your daughter Ruby, and everybody who's involved with the war. God bless everybody, and let's I hope we can find some peace and extra prayers for the people in Florida tonight too. So I want to thank.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yes, and I want to thank each and every one of you for being here tonight. It looks like we even have more we can do in the future with this wonderful family, the Russells. Definitely a special place in my heart tonight, and it brings a tear to my eye because I am a very emotional person, but I feel the love, and I love that. So let's all have a moment of silence and use that moment to pray for the people suffering tonight or in harm's way. And then we're all going to unmute and say the serenity prayer and end the meeting that way. So here's our moment of silence. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change things I can, wisdom to know the difference.
Amen.
Amen. Wow, this was an incredible meeting tonight. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Nina, Kobe, and Kyle. Thank you. I hope I get to meet you someday in person and give you all a big hug.
That would be lovely.
So accept this virtual hug.
That's right. We totally feel it. And Aubrey, thank you for making this happen, for being the holder of so much support. It's really incredible what you're doing. It's so powerful and so important. And I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Till we meet again, everyone. Take care. Take good care of yourselves, and much love to everybody. Good night.